Well, ladies and gentlemen, we are in the home stretch here. We have two additional presentations for you. Anna Vidovich will perform. That'll be our final act, if you will. But first, we're going to hear from Roland Griffiths. Dr. Griffiths is a professor in the departments of psychiatry and neurosciences at the Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine. His principal research focus has been on the behavioral and subjective effects of mood-altering drugs. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Griffiths.
So for the next few minutes, I'm going to tell you a little bit about why I'm so excited about some research that we've been doing on psilocybin and the experimental mystical experience. Psilocybin is the principal psychoactive component of the psilocybe genus of mushroom, and this is the so-called magic mushroom. Psilocybin in the form of these mushrooms have been used for hundreds, possibly thousands of years in various cultures in structured manners for religious purposes. What I want to tell you about today is some research that demonstrates that psilocybin can occasion a very high probability mystical type experiences that appear virtually identical to naturally occurring mystical experiences reported by mystics throughout the ages and across different cultures. And as I'll describe, some of these findings really surprised me and I think have very provocative implications. Just a bit about my background. I've been at Johns Hopkins doing psychopharmacology research on mood-altering drugs of abuse for 35 years. About 15 years ago, I took up a meditation practice that really altered a coarse sense of self for me. And it got me asking questions about the nature of spirituality and mystical experience and how some of these kinds of sudden insights and mystical experiences can dramatically change people. It also prompted me to wonder about the relevance of my own research program in drug abuse pharmacology until I became reacquainted with the claims, mostly from the 1960s, that classical hallucinogens like psilocybin can occasion sometimes mystical experiences. And the idea of getting involved in research with that had just immediate appeal to me. And it allowed me also to kind of delve more into the science of spirituality. Well, the idea of starting research on psilocybin is one thing. Actually getting it done is another. At the time we initiated this project, which was about 10 years ago, research with the classical hallucinogens, human research, had been completely suspended for about 30 years. And this was largely because of the drug excesses of the 1960s, and that created an emotional charge around research with these compounds that lingers today. Well, after very close scrutiny by Johns Hopkins and Food and Drug Administration, we initiated a study in healthy volunteers of the effects of psilocybin. The modest goal was to determine if we could safely evaluate both the acute and persisting effects of a high dose of psilocybin. 36 people were recruited locally. They were carefully screened because of concerns that psilocybin might harm some people. All reported at least intermittent participation in spiritual or religious activities, and none had any prior experience with a classical hallucinogen. Their average age was 46 years. They were highly educated, high-functioning group of people. We had physicians, psychologists, nurses, ministers, business people, a variety of vocations represented. Each volunteer participated in 2 or 3 8-hour sessions with 2 months between sessions. And although volunteers were told that they would receive psilocybin on at least one session. The design of the study effectively obscured to volunteers and to the session monitors exactly what other drug conditions might be administered. And this was to control for expectancy effects. And in fact, all of the volunteers received both a high dose of psilocybin and, to control for expectancy, a high dose of the psychostimulant methylphenidate or Ritalin on different sessions. Before the first session, monitors met with each participant on several occasions to establish rapport and trust, which is important for decreasing potential adverse effects from psilocybin. The 8-hour sessions took place in an aesthetic living room-like environment on our research unit. Participants came to the unit at 8 in the morning, took capsules then that either contained psilocybin or methylphenidate. 2 monitors were present throughout the sessions. The participant was encouraged to lay on the couch, wear eye shades and headphones through which they listened to a program of classical music. And they were encouraged to focus their attention inward on their inner experience. If a participant reported significant anxiety, which in fact does happen sometimes, then the monitors were there to provide reassurance. Overall, it was our intention here to create a safe container for people to have their own experience. And the careful preparation and monitoring of the sessions was done because psilocybin can lead to dangerous behavior when given or taken under unprepared and unmonitored conditions. At the end of the session, and then at 2 months and 14 months, extensive questionnaires were completed and structured interviews. So what did the study show? Well, as we expected, both psilocybin and methylphenidate produced effects that peaked at about 2 hours and then were gone at about 6 hours. Also, as we expected, psilocybin produced effects typical of hallucinogen drugs. So there were perceptual changes like visual illusions, greater emotionality, both pleasant like joy or peacefulness, and less frequently unpleasant, such as great fear, and cognitive changes, such as a change in sense of meaning or suspiciousness. But the most interesting finding was that for most volunteers, psilocybin produced large increases in self-rated questionnaires that had been specifically designed to measure mystical experiences occurring in mystics throughout the ages. These are questionnaires that have been extensively studied. They've demonstrated cross-cultural and cross-religious tradition generalizability, but they had never before been used in a drug study. So in other words, on these measures, the psilocybin experience looks identical to naturally occurring religious experience. This shows some questionnaire data collected at the end of the session. It shows increases on several of the defining characteristics of mystical experience. In the upper left, the black bars are showing psilocybin response relative to methylphenidate. So in the upper left, we're seeing the core defining feature of mystical experience, and that's unity. The strong sense of the interconnectedness of all people and things, a sense that all is one, sometimes experienced as pure consciousness. And that's accompanied by a sense of sacredness, this noetic quality, the sense that what is being experienced is more true and more real than everyday reality, a sense of deeply felt positive mood, love, or peace, transcendence of time and space, and the sense that the experience cannot be adequately described in words. Increases on all 6 dimensions are thought to be definitive of mystical experience, and in this group of volunteers, over 60% met a priori criteria for having had a complete mystical experience. Now, although the physiological effects of psilocybin are gone by the end of session, the memories and thoughts about the mystical experience persist. So volunteers returned at 2 months completed various questionnaires, and this shows their rating of how personally meaningful was the experience. And this is on a scale like an everyday experience at the bottom, going up to among the top 5 or the single most personally meaningful experience of my life. The black bars show psilocybin. 70% of people were saying this is among the 5 most personally meaningful experiences of my life. And I would ask people, what does that mean? Tell me about that. And someone might say, well, gee, when my first child was born, my daughter, that changed my life forever. And recently, my father passed away. That was big. And say it's kind of like that. It's kind of like that. Here they are filling out a questionnaire. How spiritually significant was the experience? Over 30% of these already spiritually inclined people are saying that this is the single most spiritually significant experience of their lives. 70% are rating it in the top 5. So when